Homelessness in San Francisco is getting so out of control that residents are being asked to take in a homeless person, put them into your spare room. Dagan McDowell, this is the city's answer to the homeless problem, asking residents to take people in.
And a lot of the problem here in New York City, and I've witnessed it firsthand, I witnessed it this morning, in fact, are severely mentally ill, psychotic, homeless people who are a danger to the city and a danger to everyone. So what is this city going to do about them? There's a video of a homeless man in Seattle earlier this month hitting an innocent person in the back of the head with a baseball bat. That happens all over this city every day.
We have a great relationship with this gentleman. Honestly, he never does anything to offend anybody, so we don't have any reason to call any police or anyone to remove him from here. He helps us clean up our shopping center around here, keeps it nice and tidy for us. I have many people come out and ask me questions about what's going on. What is this? Is this like a memorial? No, it's not. It's just a creative man at work.
Was made by Jose Fuentes. He's a 64-year-old gardener from Mexico who's lived on this Pacoima hillside next to the 118 freeway for a couple of years now. Now, Jose says that when he arrived, this looked like most other homeless encampments around here. It was just littered with trash. He said he started this project with the front garden area. Then he used his landscaping expertise to eventually expand upward, as you can see here, adding items like small cars, then using toys to create sculptures. Then as it grew, people started to notice and they started contributing to its expansion. Now it features a graded rock garden. There's a children's slide up at top. There's a white picket fence, also a one-bedroom home that actually has some pretty great views of Pacoima at the top. The site has really become a sensation on social media. Now, Jose told us that no one has ever came to offer him housing or to tell him to leave. We've reached out to Caltrans. By this afternoon, they told us they're not able to meet our deadline for a statement or a comment. And we've also reached out to City Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez's office. In a statement, she accused Caltrans of being negligent in maintaining this area. She says she's introduced new legislation to address the cost and responsibility that her district has endured. She says the district will continue to work with appropriate agencies to coordinate services for the unhoused who are living on state property, like is what's happening here. Now, we talked to Jose, who is up there right now. He said that he has never been offered any housing, but that he would accept it if that was ever offered. He also said that if that happens, he would try to make it as beautiful or as creative, whatever that space may be, as he has done to this space. But again, no housing, he says, has been offered to him yet.
Beachfront homeless encampments. It's a trend you've probably seen more of during the pandemic, even though it's illegal. New encampments have been popping up throughout L.A. in the last 5 months. Mayor Eric Garcetti and L.A. County officials vowed to get people off the streets during the pandemic. But as NBC4 I-Team investigator Joel Grover is finding, the number of people living outside appears to have multiplied.
Two women beat the summer heat in a pool set up on a sidewalk at a new encampment in Venice. To fill the pool, they tapped into the water line from the building next door. In other parts of Venice, there are also new encampments on the beach, on the world-famous boardwalk. A year ago, this encampment in front of Venice's Penmar golf course was just a few tents, but now it's expanded to almost a mile long. Venice resident Alan Parsons.
It's a failure of the local government to address homelessness.
Since the pandemic began, new encampments are popping up all across L.A., taking up entire blocks that used to have no tents. This encampment that used to cover just the sidewalk under the 101 freeway at Gower recently grew to cover the medians in the middle of the street, too.
How have we surrendered to the fact that that's normal?
Estella Lopez represents downtown businesses in the area that includes Skid Row.
In addition to COVID, is the city worried about what else is growing underneath those encampments? People are sitting in their own waste. We have had typhus. We have had tuberculosis, staph, rodents, fleas, bed bugs. All of that is living in these encampments.
Law enforcement tells the I-Team there are now more homeless on the streets for two reasons. First, starting in April, to stem the spread of COVID behind bars, California jails and prisons began releasing 3,500 nonviolent inmates out onto the streets.
Skid Row has been a destination for people recently released from county jail when they don't have a home or friends or family to go to.
Also, the city of LA stopped enforcing several laws during the pandemic. For example, they're not enforcing the ordinance that forbids the homeless from having bulky items at their tents. That's why you're now seeing huge encampments with sofas, mattresses, and yes, even wading pools. Mayor Garcetti has boasted this summer that more and more housing has been built for the homeless, like this Bridge Home shelter in Venice.
So to Eric Garcetti, I would say that this is anything but a success.
The mayor's website says when a Bridge Home shelter opens, the city will establish enforcement zones to ensure that tents are taken down. But all around that Venice Bridge Home, new tents are being set up all the time during the pandemic. Is that because the shelter is full? The I-Team obtained the occupancy figures from mid-July to mid-August, and out of 154 beds, only 124 were occupied. That means there were close to 30 vacancies.
Why aren't these beds being used? They do not allow drugs or alcohol within that facility. It comes with a curfew. So, I think a lot of these folks don't want to abide by the rules.
The mayor has stated publicly that during the pandemic, no one who is homeless will be moved from their current location. He cites guidance from the CDC, which says moving anyone could help spread COVID.
John Mavrikis owns a restaurant inside City Market. He says what's happening outside is driving people away.
It's a drug activity for the most part. It's people being threatened outside.
In fact, Mavrikis had just called police after a security guard hired by the market faced a belligerent group out front.
It's almost a daily occurrence now.
So is the cleaning up of trash and other things.
Beer and maybe
A little bit of vomit. Yeah. Sergeant Tabitha McLemore heads IMPD's homeless unit, which has 6 officers.
do me a favor, make sure you're not blocking the sidewalk for me, okay?
She gets the concerns. In fact, as we got ready to talk on camera.
We can't touch right now with COVID going on, okay?
I gotta say.
Oh, we can't shake hands because of COVID. All right, no. Can you go over there for me so I can finish talking to them?
She says the homeless population isn't larger, but with fewer people downtown, it is more visible. Plus, with COVID restrictions, there are fewer places to find shelter or hang out. But she says the biggest challenge right now?
We are actually having our drug dealers that come down here and they focus and they prey on our homeless community. Our narcotics unit, they are hitting our drug dealers on a daily basis, especially down here at the city market.
But she also says of those dealing,
spice is so easily accessible and it's really hard to prosecute spice right now. So they know that if they come down here that nothing big is going to happen to them.
McLemore says officers are called here routinely.
So they were called here on a trespass violation. So this gentleman here has actually been trespassed 3 times.
She says plans are to hire an off-duty officer to work part-time security here and a social worker to help ensure those who are homeless and or struggling with various issues get the help they need.
Sergeant McLemore told Mary in most cases it's not the homeless causing trouble, but those selling drugs.
The streets of Los Angeles turned into one big public toilet. There are 36,000 homeless people in LA, but most of them don't have bathrooms or access to the most basic human needs.
A homeless man wakes up on South Hope Street. He unbuckles his belt, walks over to the front door of a business, pulls down his pants, and defecates right on the doormat in broad daylight, leaving behind a pile of human waste.
We are not in a third world country.
Maria Yanoshi works in the building where the incident happened.
This is what happens in third world countries. We are in Los Angeles.
Unfortunately, people squatting between cars and urinating on streets is now a common sight across Los Angeles. Next to this West LA homeless encampment, this guy guy even urinated right on a cop car.
Public restrooms won't let us go to the bathroom because we're homeless.
Jennifer lives in this large encampment under the 101 freeway. Where do all the people in these tents go to the bathroom?
In bottles on the side of the buildings, right here on the curb.
As far back as 2012, the county health department warned that piles of feces and urine on the streets posed an immediate threat to public health. The shortage of public restrooms for the homeless was a leading cause of a hepatitis A outbreak. The problem of homelessness and public defecation is only getting worse, like in this residential neighborhood in Mar Vista.
My car has been defecated on not once but twice.
Roman Samily and his family live half a block from the encampment.
I'm scared of the public health hazards.
Everyone's at risk at some level.
At risk because what's on our sidewalks could end up on your shoes, and you could track it into your home or office, according to Dr. Jeffrey Klausner of UCLA's School of Public Health.
People's shoes or their clothes can be contaminated. Then they inadvertently touch their shoes, they touch their eye, they touch their mouth. We can get viral gastroenteritis, norovirus.
A public health risk and a big cost to taxpayers to pick up all the bottles of urine and piles of feces on city streets. The city of LA now pays a private firm called Clean Harbors to clean up human waste and needles.
The city should be putting porta potties out at every encampment.
But most of the city's hundreds of encampments are nowhere near a public toilet. In fact, LA has only 16 mobile toilet stations for its 36,000 homeless people. To make matters worse, with no funding for round-the-clock security, the city hauls away these toilets at night, leaving the homeless no choice but to go on the streets.
If you're allowing the homeless to set up tents, they should at least have a bathroom.
Why doesn't the city provide toilets to the majority of the homeless?
We simply don't have enough money.
LA Mayor Garcetti admits the lack of toilets is a crisis for his city.
We simultaneously have to clean up streets, clean up this crap, and build housing. And if I had enough money to do all three, we wouldn't be in this place.
Public health experts suggest if you're walking in an area where people might be going to the bathroom on the streets or sidewalks, take off your shoes before you walk into your home or office so you don't track bacteria or viruses inside.
A one-way, one-block alley has neighbors living in constant fear. Willow Street currently has the highest concentration of tents in San Francisco, according to city data. And residents from the luxury condo next to it say the problem has only exploded since COVID.
It's a street residents say they're afraid to drive through, and most wouldn't dare walk through it day or night.
It's pretty consistently nerve-wracking. This is just seems to be a safe space for chop shops, drug trafficking. The garbage, first of all, is like that's a huge health concern. Rats.
And it's all within feet of the Artani, a modern condominium on Van Ness where units have sold for more than $1 million.
What would you say is the most egregious part of that alleyway?
Probably the threats of violence. The threats of violence to us, other residents in the building.
I've seen people physically fighting, and I myself was leaving once and a man approached my car yelling obscenities and threatening me, which was really scary.
There was a guy who passed out in front of our door with a needle hanging out of his arm all day long, and our children had to walk past that.
Artani residents say they're confronted with unwanted activity as soon as they exit the garage. They shared photos of a man they say regularly urinates. The smell permeates the entire garage. They say another tries to break into their garage. Others are captured damaging their property, even trespassing and stealing packages.
I can't really reconcile just the fact that this criminal activity is allowed to happen. And, you know, I myself have called the cops a number of times.
As recently as October 5th, the city came and did a complete sweep of the street, seen here in this photo. But by the next day, the tents and the trash had returned.
The police don't actually come when we call 911 because we're actively being threatened by somebody who's wielding a club or a knife. They don't come.
San Francisco police directed our inquiry to the Healthy Streets Operations Center, which coordinates the city's response to quality of life issues. The Department of Emergency Management Management says city teams visited Willow Street on 24 different days this year and placed more than 150 people in navigation centers, hospitals, or shelters. They also removed more than 375 empty tents. Still, the crisis has driven away customers, according to this local business owner.
Absolutely, we don't feel safe here because we have really bad experience during the COVID. Whenever I work, I lock the doors because I want to kind of like I'm trying to keep customers safe.
Supervisor Matt Haney's office recently held a town hall and promised deep cleanings twice a month on Willow Street.
A home inside a tunnel in the ground.
Well, it's kind of scary and, it's not safe for them, for sure.
The abandoned mine shaft discovered in December with a man living inside. Officials finding an address sign, lighting, canned goods, and a mattress. The makeshift home, built near the El Dorado Trail in Placerville, is used daily by residents like Bob Nealon.
We use it a lot. Bicycle ride on it, hike. Just a lot of stuff you can do on there, and you see a lot of people.
El Dorado County Sheriff's Office says several people called law enforcement after multiple encounters with the man, possibly creating fires and even snapping a whip as people walked by, concerning residents.
No, that's scary, definitely scary. And, there's a lot of women on that bike trail, jogging and doing their thing. So, I worry about them too.
Officials tried to remove the man for months, offering him services, but say he kept coming back, telling law enforcement he's lived there for years.
Not only the concerns about the people, the passersby, about the threatening type behavior, but if these individuals are lighting fires in the area, then there's obviously potential for wildfires.
According to state records, in the past 15 years, 18 people have died and another 40 people have been injured at abandoned mines.
There's definitely dangers of these shafts collapsing and not being really stable, a stable environment for a human to live.
The underground home now boarded up, still shocking those who helped clear it out.
I have never heard of this. I couldn't have really even thought this one up.
Homelessness all over the headlines this week. And if San Francisco spends nearly $250 million on the homeless every year, why are there still thousands of people living on the street? Where does that money go? And
it's the result of programs that are not really working, not working to anybody's satisfaction.
Well, it's hard to argue with that, but to better understand how this all works, let's start with that one big number. $241 million. Now, of that, $50 million funds shelters and another $50 million fund health services for the truly homeless. But the single most important thing to know about that $241 million is that most of it has absolutely nothing to do with the people we see on the streets.
That is a great observation. I think it's missed by many in the city. We're not spending $241 million a year on the 7,000 or 8,000 people who are homeless in San Francisco. We're spending more than half of that money, actually, to keep people in permanent housing.
That's right. $140 million worth of the entire homeless budget houses approximately 9,000 people. And those are 9,000 people we don't even count as homeless.
It's like all of our hotels, people who've lived in housing for 10 years are in the homeless budget. So people will say, well, we don't notice it. But if we didn't spend that money, you'd notice it because the numbers would be off the charts.
So that leaves us with these 6,686 people we do count as homeless, and they fall into two separate categories: those in some kind of temporary shelter and those who actually live on the street.
Art Agnos and Feinstein were cool.
And two perfect examples of this walked right up to us while we were interviewing former Mayor Art Agnos. First is Lee, who might look like he lives on the street.
Well, I got a room.
And then there's Ron.
Why aren't you living in a room or of some kind now?
Well, I tried in North Beach, for example.
And at that point, we had some vintage impromptu Agnos.
I'll take you there.
Really? In Mission Street?
I'll take you to the diagnostic center.
And just like that, Ron was in the car with the former mayor and off to the Mission Neighborhood Resource Center. If you want a shelter bed in San Francisco, this is where you have to go, and you've got to be willing to play by the city's rules.
You have to do finger imaging and all this stuff to get an emergency shelter bed.
So a lot of people, like Richard here, make another choice.
So you choose not to go to the shelters?
Well, sure, partner. Come on, man.
Have you actually been in some of these places?
Clearly, we're not meeting the demands that people have on the streets.
Want to make this even more complicated? San Francisco manages all of this through at least 8 different city departments, issuing some 400 contracts with at least 75 private organizations. A tangled network of services with no unifying oversight by the city that actually hands out most of the money.
The one area where we have not done as good of a job as we need to is really coordinating all of those systems.
Here's one little scenario for you. A man with mental health challenges is staying in a nonprofit or a charity shelter until one day he voluntarily checks out, lands in some trouble, lands in the custody of law enforcement, who takes him to a hospital where he spends some time in a psych ward. Now, in each one of these 3 cases, it can be recorded as a by-the-book acceptable outcome, even though the guy is back out on the street. And the city has no single unified way of tracking any of this, as people simply ricochet between service providers.
And if you're a provider, it's difficult to know what other services that individual or families are receiving.
Then there's another immense challenge facing San Francisco. Even if we could convince all of these people to accept help, our best services do not scale to the overwhelming demand.
Navigation centers do a good job for those they serve, but the numbers are so small. You're talking about 50 people here. Come on, you're talking about a 6,000 person problem.
So how do we ever start to untangle all of this with results we can actually see?
That's a great question, and I think really the only way that we're going to change people's perception is by making progress.